we brought you an investigation about 2 weeks ago into an officer who had been rehired from the same department that he was fired from 23 years ago, the Baton Rouge Police Department. Since our investigation, Officer Tremel Neldair has now been added to the Brady list at the District Attorney's Office. Plus, we sat down with one of Neldair's victim's mother on his rehiring.
That feeling that I had that night when he came home from that incident, I felt it. I'm like, what are you talking? Who are you talking? Who did they hire back? How did they hire him back? Why did they hire him back? Why? Who let this happen?
Angel Matthews is a mother who is hurt and angry. Let's take you back to July 29, 2000, for a traffic stop around midnight on Florida Boulevard. Matthews' then 19-year-old son, Brandon Butler, was the driver that night. Baton Rouge police officer Tremel Neldair was the officer. Butler was told to get out of his car and to get on his knees.
And he said to Brandon, if I put his in his face, because he put Brandon's face to him. If he put it in his mouth, would he bite it? And Brandon said he kept calling me a little when Brandon, I think at some point, was looking at him, he asked him if he, what you want to do? You want to fight me, jump on me, or something of that sort? And Brandon said no. He said, I know better than to fight a police officer.
Less than 4 weeks later, Officer Neldair was the subject of yet another internal affairs investigation. This time, the victim was a woman, and the claim was sexual harassment. Greg Ferries was the Baton Rouge police chief at the time. He spoke to Unfiltered with Kieran about the investigation from 2000.
He intervened in what appeared to be a verbal domestic argument and used that opportunity to go in and inappropriately place his hands on the female that was involved in the argument, and to make suggestions and invitations to her that were, in our opinion, quite inappropriate.
What did you do?
I terminated him.
Why?
For the conduct that we just discussed.
Records obtained by Unfiltered with Kieran show that after Neldair was fired from BRPD, he went to work at the Point Capee Parish Sheriff's Office in 2002. He worked with the Sheriff's Office for 3 years before a break. He would be hired back again in 2006 for 5 months. Both times, records show he voluntarily resigned. From there, he moved to the Port Allen Police Department. But in 2010, records obtained by Unfiltered show before he could be terminated, he resigned. As time moved along, both victims continued on with their lives. The woman who was sexually assaulted buried what happened and told us she simply did not want to relive any part of it. Brandon Butler has since grown from a teenager into a working man.
What does Brandon do professionally now, though?
He is a Baton Rouge City police officer. Unbelievable, huh? Yeah, well. But to say he wanted to be a police officer in Baton Rouge, I was shocked. And I said, why? Although we look now, 23 years later, to see the awesome young man he is, the man that he has become, that situation could have caused him to take a whole different turn towards the law. Not even from a black or white, just the law, period. Why should I respect the law when the law doesn't respect me?
Now fast forward to March 2023. Neldair was hired back to the Baton Rouge Police Department as a full-time officer back working the streets. How did his victim and now Officer Brandon Butler find out?
He found out in roll call.
Your son found out in roll call the officer who abused him was back on his own shift.
That he was going to be coming to that shift.
Yes. What went through him?
He should not have to worry about his abuser being able to come to the same place for which he was dismissed for misconduct. Where does that happen? Where? And that feeling is here. It won't go away. It won't. It will not. When I read his testimony from that day, everything just came back. I relived the marks on his neck. Brandon has green eyes. His green eyes were just so red from the tears, just in his face was just red from where he had held him down on the cart.
Brandon's mother says her son kept the news to himself for a while, unsure how to even tell his mother. Since our report, she says no one from administration has reached out to her or her son, despite her reaching out to Chief Murphy Paul through a mutual friend.
But what signal does it send to me, to Brandon, the other mothers, wives, or whomever, grandmothers, or whomever who has men and women that's on the force, and this is what they bring back in to be a part of their brotherhood, to a part of their family, someone who has done this? What does that say? It's a disgrace to the badge. It's a disgrace to those guys. It's a disgrace to those women that are out there every day, leaving their families to come out and protect us.
Our investigation found new officers start at pay step 5, or roughly $41,000. The highest an officer can make is pay step 19, or close to $62,000. Nelder started at pay step 16. Officers who have been working for BRPD for decades are making well below pay step 16.
I am sure it's an insult.
Since our investigation, Officer Nelder has been added to the Brady List, a list the District Attorney's Office maintains of any law enforcement officials who have had untruthful issues upheld.
Did Baton Rouge Police make you aware that they had rehired Officer Tremel Nelder?
Not initially, no, but as I received notice that he was an officer, we called and verified his employment, and we're told that he was hired on at the time, and at that point is when we put him on the Brady List.
How did you find out he was rehired?
From you.
Hiller Moore says that means his prosecutors would prefer not to call Officer Nelder as a witness in future criminal cases. That raises the question of how efficient an officer is if he or she cannot testify.
We would take a chance on calling an officer, and we'd have to be honest with the jury to say, I'm going to call this officer that has been factually found to be untruthful, but I'm calling him now, and I'm telling you I think he's telling you the truth.
If you can ask the police chief anything, what do you ask?
What are you going to do about, I guess I should say now, Officer Nelder? Because, I mean, he's back.
What do you want for to happen to Officer Nelder?
I want him gone. He should not be on the force.
Butler's mother said her son can't speak due to Baton Rouge Police Department's policy against speaking with the media, and he would never violate protocol. She fears retaliation for her son because she decided to speak up. Now, we did reach out to Officer Nelder for that very first investigation we did, and he told us no comment back then. As for the Baton Rouge Police Department, they do not respond to any requests or interviews from Unfiltered with Kieran. It is why they do not have a comment in this report. The Baton Rouge Police Department has fired one of their own officers after a series of investigations by Unfiltered with Kieran. Tremel Nelder was placed on administrative leave on Monday. Less than 24 hours later, BRPD confirms he has officially been terminated.
This was definitely a secret for Baton Rouge Police Department. It was a secret that would have stayed a secret had you not broken the story.
Angel Matthews teared up when she heard the man who sexually harassed her son 23 years ago was fired.
It was a relief to hear that he's been terminated. That's what I wanted. You know, that's what I think needed to happen.
Matthew's son, Brandon Butler, who is now 42 years old and a Baton Rouge police officer himself, was pulled over in July 2000 when he was 19 years old. Records obtained by Unfiltered with Kieran show Officer Tremel Nelder ordered Butler out of his car around midnight and to get on his knees. From there, Nelder made inappropriate sexual remarks and even taunted the teen about trying to fight him. Not even a month later, the same officer, Tremel Nelder, responded to a domestic call where he separated a man and woman. His own police report shows Nelder told the man, quote, there was enough to go around 10 times or more and not to get caught up on just one. He went on to advise the man, quote, it did not matter if she could stand on her head and make her whistle Dixie. Sometimes you just have to move on. Then he went inside the home where then BRPD Police Chief Greg Ferries documented that Nelder put his hands inside the woman's private area before offering her 24-hour protection in exchange for cooking for him and giving him a massage. He also wrote in his report that he told her, quote, "Don't call him for money or to give him some. If you want to give up some, call someone else." And that, quote, "Whatever she had and however she threw it on, she got him hooked, but she needed to leave him alone." As we first reported in April, both victims reported their cases to Internal Affairs, which triggered then Chief Ferries to fire him.
Police officers cannot be allowed to act like that.
In the last 23 years, Nell Dare moved to the Point Capee Parish Sheriff's Office and Port Allen Police Department. He resigned from Point Capee, and in lieu of termination, he resigned from Port Allen. In March 2023, less than 3 months ago, Nell Dare was hired back to the same department he was fired from by Baton Rouge Police Chief Murphy Paul and Deputy Chief Myron Daniels. He was brought in at pay step 16, meaning a starting salary of $56,000. Compared to other officers who start at nearly $40,000 or pay step 5.
The fact that the Baton Rouge police chief rehired Officer Nell Dare is, I think, an embarrassment to the Baton Rouge Police Department, and particularly an embarrassment to the police chief.
Rafael Goyeneche is the president of the Metropolitan Crime Commission and a former prosecutor turned watchdog.
He should have never been rehired. The fact that he was terminated today, fired, is an indication and confirmation that he should have never been rehired in the first place.
Unfiltered with Kieran's investigations put Nell Dare on the district attorney's Brady list, a list of officers who have issues with their credibility. Our investigations also triggered a private meeting between several women and East Baton Rouge Parish Mayor President Sharon Weston Broome. Leading that meeting was the president and CEO of STAR, the Sexual Trauma Awareness and Response Group, Morgan Lamondre.
My concerns with the rehiring of Nell Dare was that BRPD literally fired him for sexual harassment and misconduct. I mean, rehiring him not only jeopardized the safety and well-being of our community, but it also sent a strong message that BRPD tolerates sexual misconduct or predatory behavior of officers. And rape is already one of the most underreported crimes. So how can we as advocates credibly encourage victims to report to law enforcement and tell them they will be taken seriously if BRPD is willing to rehire someone who has an established record of sexual harassment and misconduct?
Sources tell Unfiltered with Kieran the mayor said she was not aware of Nell Dare's rehiring. The next business day, Nell Dare was placed on administrative leave. The following day, he was fired.
Firing Nell Dare isn't enough because we still, quite frankly, don't understand how he was rehired to begin with.
If the chief won't provide that information, I believe that the mayor has a duty to appoint someone to investigate, to determine how and why Officer Nell Dare was rehired in the first place.
Both Lamondre and Goyeneche say just because Nell Dare is now gone, the issue is far from over.
I believe that the Baton Rouge Police Department Chief Paul owes the public an explanation as to why this disgraced officer that was fired for cause was rehired by him during his administration.
Matthews says she and her son now have peace. She spoke up on her son's behalf a month ago and today because he as an officer cannot speak to the media.
But Brandon, I could see the relief on him. I would be lying if I say that it hasn't affected him, because it did.
Now, we did reach out to Mayor President Sharon Weston Broome's media contact for a response on Nell Dare's rehiring and termination. Our email and text were seen, but as of this report, no comment yet. We also reached out to Nell Dare for any response. He did not answer. With Unfiltered with Kieran, I'm Kieran Chawla.